Okay, we are live. Give people a few minutes to come in before we get started. Yep, I can see some people coming in already. Welcome. I guess we might as well. We can get started. People can kind of trickle in as we get into it. But so we're live with Ike Haxton, who's a poker legend and quite a good chess player as well. But in poker, I just looked you up, and you're sixth all time. You've got over 61 million. We've just in live earnings. I don't think that's counting online either.
I mean, that's gross cashes, which is a hilarious metric. I haven't added it up, but that's, I don't against much more than 40 million in buy-in.
Well,
So
it's still pretty good. As a chess player, I'd take it.
I'm just saying, like, that like all-time money list is largely just a list of the people who have been consistently playing the highest stakes for a long. Many people at the top of the list who are not winning a lot relative to how much they have spent in buy-ins.
Right. That makes it's not 60 million in cash is not 60 million in your pocket for sure, but
Right.
it's still pretty impressive though.
I just am like a little sheepish about those ranking lists. It's nothing at all like being, top 10 rated chess player in the world. Many of the people at the top of the list are not necessarily among the very best players in the world.
That I mean, maybe that's something we can come back to in terms of. So we're talking about chess and poker today. Similarities, differences. I mean, maybe one that we could talk about is like, how do you know who's the best? Because in chess, we've got this elo system, right? And it's like, for all the flaws and for as much as people criticize it, it works pretty well.
Yeah,
The top rated players are mostly the best players, I'd say. You don't really have that in poker, do you?
absolutely not. There's essentially nothing in terms of like a published, generally agreed standard of who the top players are. I mean, like the all-time list is close to as good a metric there is. There are like a handful of things that are a little bit closer to an elo. There's like several different publications like GPI and Card Player and stuff maintain like a player of the year players ranking where you are awarded points for tournament results and the value of the results decays over time or resets once a year or whatever. But like, honestly, no one takes those lists serious, or they're frequently topped by people who are not exceptionally strong players in the last year, often in like very large field, lower stakes tournaments. There's just no good ranking whatsoever.
There's also, there's so many different ways to play poker, right? Like, I mean, chess, we have different time controls. Chess 960 is sort of picking up a little steam, but like mostly chess is chess. But in poker, you've got cash, tournaments, no limit, PLO. I mean, all sorts, 7 card stud. I don't know if anyone really plays that anymore, but you got all sorts of things like mixed games.
Um,
Like a lot of different ways to play. Not even just one game, like many different games, really.
right. I mean, chess. Chess is basically one game. Poker is really more of like a family of games. I mean, the unifying feature of poker is really just the betting structure. The idea that you have, you play with a deck of cards, you have a system for ranking hands, and you have a betting system where you can bet and raise and call and fold, and eventually the hand ends and the pot is awarded to one or more of the best hands according to whatever ranking system you're playing with. And there's actually like a massive base of different games that have that core feature, and they're all poker.
I wish as I guess I would consider myself a casual poker player now. I kind of wish more games were popular, but both in casinos and in home games, because I
I,
feel like that old school of like dealer's choice, it's kind of more fun. And now that No Limit dominates so much, I think it takes some of the fun out of it because it's made it like kind of more technical and more dry. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people are still quite bad at No Limit, but it's like I kind of like the mystery of like you might never have played this game before. Like, what even makes sense as a strategy in some weird game you've never played before?
yeah. I mean that's a very fun challenge. Like I actually have played quite a lot of games outside of Hold'em and Column and Omaha. There was a stretch of my career, roughly 2016 or 17 until the start of COVID, when maybe my main focus was playing a live cash game in Vegas that was typically like an 11 game mix or something like that.
Yeah, so at that point you can't specialize all
Yeah,
that much.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, there's probably approximately no one in the world who is as good at seven card stud eight or better as the two best no limit hold'em players good at no limit hold'em.
Uh, so I'm sorry, I didn't catch the very last thing you said.
Oh, I'm just saying, like, if you were to or how good players are at a game by like, how much do they lose playing against a perfect computer? There's probably no one or maybe like a couple of people in the entire world who are as good at seven card stud eight or better as the 200th best player in
Yeah,
Hold'em.
because there's so many people working on No Limit studying
And
developers.
there are great publicly available tools, and it's a simpler game. No Limit Hold'em is, computationally speaking, one of the simplest games available. You have
Do you have a favorite game? A favorite poker game?
um I have often answered this question by saying pot limit Badoogie, which is a bit of a joke answer because I probably played less than 500 hands in my life. But it's actually a great game, and I genuinely would love it if there were more opportunity to play it. It's it's a really unusual game. It's very different from every other poker game.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever played that one. I've actually, in my own I don't know, you know, probably if people follow my Substack, they know this that I did play poker professionally for a while. But actually, I played No Limit for a while and I switched to PLO. I would say at the end of the day, the majority of my career and what I had more success with was actually PLO. I found I like PLO better, and I found that's kind of seems to be pretty typical for chess players because I think as a chess player, you're used to having a board to look at, so like a lot of information to sink your teeth into. In No Limit, it's only two cards in the board, obviously. So to me, maybe as a chess player, it feels like I'm sort of floating around without a lot of information to latch onto. And I think this is not true for the really best No Limit players, but to me, it feels like I'm always guessing, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable with that.
I mean, I think there is a lot of truth underlying that intuition. Yeah, I, I I can see how No Limit is in a lot of ways like the one of the least chess like games. Um, And that impression that you feel like you're always guessing is kind of the right one. Like, um, a good friend of mine and like really great poker thinker, Ben Solsky, liked to say that No Limit Hold'em is frequencies driven, where Pot Limit Omaha is equities driven. Which is to say that like in PLO, a lot of the decision driven by like, yeah, you look at how your hand interacts with the board. That gives you a pretty direct sort of guidance on what you need to be doing. And in No Limit Hold'em, you have so few different hands. You only have two cards, and by the time you're playing the river in some tight range spot, you maybe have done something different with the vast majority of them. You might, reach the river with 20 distinct different hands at least some non-negligible frequency, and a whole bunch of them are essentially interchangeable. They're all hands that either like close to always win or close to never win. And a lot of the challenge in the game is like making sure you bluff often enough with your hands that win and not too much and not little, and making sure you call roughly the right amount with your hand, beat all the bluffs and lose to all the value bets. And yeah, it's which feels a lot like guessing, because from an optimal perspective you're trying to get these frequencies right in a defensive sort of way, and from a practical exploitive trying to beat your opponent perspective, you're trying to guess which direction they're getting that wrong, and just always call with your bluff catchers if you think they have too much, and never if they don't, and always bluff with your candidate bluffs if you think they don't enough, or never if you think they don't much. But fundamentally, it really is a game that is a lot about guessing.
You know, so one thing I definitely really wanted to ask you about is how chess and poker are different from you on a kind of experiential level. And I think like you're really getting a huge difference, both in terms of the theory of the games and the experience of in chess. From a very literal standpoint, you only have to play the position on the board. If you understood the board perfectly, that's all you need to know.
Yeah.
In poker, that's really not true. You're in this way that's actually very weird and probably unfamiliar for people who've only played chess and not poker. You're sort of existing in this cloud where you have your actual hand, but you actually need to think about all the hands you could have and all the hands you should have. And that's actually, in a very like literal way, that is important in poker. Whereas in chess, you really don't have to think about every position you could be in, right? I'm not sure if I'm making sense here, but is that sort of part of the experience of like how they're different for you?
Yeah. Although I say that like, and this is very hard to do, but at a certain point in your development of poker, you begin to think about the types of decisions you're making in a way that puts things into closer alignment, where like I'm almost not thinking about the hand that I have. I'm thinking about the action sequence, everything that's happened up to this point in the end, from both players at the board, and rather than trying to decide what I do with the particular hand that I have, I'm trying to construct an overall strategy for what I would do at this point in the hand with anything that I might have, and then slotting the hand that I happen to have into that strategy. And that's kind of that's how the computers solve poker as well. Is it's computing a strategy for like a decision is that and you have an output that is the strategy freehand. And of course, in practice, on a time limit, that there are limits to how pro you can be about this sort of approach. But
at your level, a lot of that is prepared away from the table, right? In the sense that you've seen a lot of spots before, and you probably have some sort of general blueprint of your strategy in a lot of spots.
I mean, kind of as you go from pre-flop to the river, that goes from being extremely true to not very like uh the first couple of decisions for the flop have a lot of similarity to openings in chess, for example, where like I am mainly just recalling things that I already know, or if I am in a slightly unfamiliar, recalling the most simple thing I know, and there is very little like calculation or anything along those lines. I'm just doing the thing that I remember. And even on the flop in Hold'em or PLO, largely I am doing that. But the game is so large that by the time you're playing turns and rivers, the possibility that like you really know this spot and or just remember something is pretty low. Although in some of the more common scenarios, like yeah, a pretty concrete idea of how some spot works.
Yeah. And I also, I'm certainly not an expert in like, poker solvers or theory at this point, but as far as I understand, if your opponent's not playing their half of an optimal strategy, then your optimal response could be wildly different.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So essentially, as soon as either player goes off the reservation in terms of optimal strategy, potentially all bets are off, and very weird things could, that are not
Right.
the
Yeah.
GTO strategy could start happening.
I mean, and there's like kind of two different flavors of that. Even there's like we're doing something kind of normal, but I think my opponent is getting details wrong. Like I'm in some perfectly normal line where I've raised pre-flop and the big blind has called, and I bet the flop and the turn. Now we're on the river, and I think that he has played much too loose or much too tight at the decisions, and their range is not what it should be. And I have some guess what they're going to get wrong on the river as well. And like I have some idea of the optimal strategy here, and then I want to deviate from that based on the guesses I'm making. And then there's when you get to a place in the game that just shouldn't happen and there isn't an answer, like say I raise and the big blind calls and the board comes high cards and they just make a big bet that just never do that. And suddenly, like in a very little way, there's no right answer here. It from a solver perspective that like this part of the tree is not. And
Is that when something like that happens? Do you feel like more like excited, like like fresh ground, or more like is there any like sort of nervousness of like like there's no answer here?
uh, it depends, and in game a lot of the time, you don't know you don't know if you're right. Like your opponent does something you think they're not supposed to do, and if it's like a beginner, you're reasonably confident that like they're just making a mistake, and you can just try to make a guess and do what you think is going to work. If it's another strong player and they do something that you don't think is supposed to happen, now you're in this spot where you're like taking very seriously that you're entirely mistaken about how this situation is supposed to work, and they know something that you don't. And you have to like quickly decide, am I gonna kind of trust them and try to respond to this according to like a quick guesswork of what would be a reasonable response if I think that they're the real thing, versus um I don't trust them. I think this is nonsense, and I am going to try to make a guess about why they've made this mistake and how I can, do something really extreme that takes advantage of it. And often not obvious which it is. Uh,
Yeah, in chess, I tend to come down on the side of like you can't trust your opponent. Like if you can take a piece and you don't see a refutation, at least in chess, what I would tell my students is like you have to take it and make them prove it, because the alternative of just always taking your opponent's word for it is gonna mostly cause you to lose by 1,000 small cuts. It's
right.
both in an individual game and in terms of like learning in the long.
Yeah, fundamentally in chess, you never gain an advantage except when you identify that your opponent has done something wrong and proceed accordingly.
It is, something I noticed that's odd about chess is how willing most players are actually to take their opponent's word for it, even when their opponent does something wildly wrong. Like, it's sort of like, hey, let's take a step back. This move does not violate, like, this move does not follow any chess principles. They weaken their king. They're not developing anything based on everything we know about chess. This is crazy.
Yeah,
But there is sort of a psychological effect where when a lot of players see that, they're like, oh man, like this must be like next level. And I have to go even crazier to refute it.
right.
Yeah, I don't know if you sort of see that in poker, but there seems to be something psychologically that's like very appealing about that type of thought process.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, yeah, it's tricky in poker because like, I mean, there are analogs like, in chess, you might see it. My opponent appears to have hung a piece. Why can't I just take it? There actually are occasionally pretty directly analogous situations in poker. Something that comes to mind is like my opponent has bet 10 times the pot on the river. And there are situations where that's a perfect good play. There are also situations where I have the nuts sufficiently often that when they bet that big, I can safely respond by never calling with anything except the nuts. And if you find yourself in this spot with a pretty good hand, but not the nuts, you actually are in a kind of similar situation to like, it looks like they've just hung it. It looks like they just played in a way where I never have to call anything except the nuts. And
It's sort of like in that situation, right? It's like if you're right, you have a sort of trivial way to exploit them in theory. But if you think they're really wrong, you start going, maybe I can make even more money by calling with some other hands too.
right, yeah, I mean, so there are kind of multiple ways to guess at which kind of mistake your opponent is making. And often there is, no intrinsic information contained in how the hand that has played out that lets you guess. Like the intrinsically, just looking at the action sequence in the hand, maybe the most you can do to take advantage of this is only call nuts, because this seems like an impossibly large bet allowed to do that. But then you can sort of take in extrinsic information outside of the action sequence, like, this guy is a maniac and he had 3 double McAllens in the last 2 hours. I think maybe I can just call with whatever I happen to have, and he probably just doesn't have it. Which is, not so much a thing that enters into chess decisions very often.
Yeah. Do you think is there anything that like chess players can learn from poker players or vice versa? Like in any sort of, thought process or skill that you feel like one of the player pools has that the other's missing on?
Um, that's a tough question. I mean, I think, an obvious one that comes to mind, and not so much like a direct uh, choosing the best move kind of skill, but I think chess players and poker players often occupy equally unhelpful extremes in some psychological aspects of, like, trying to play a game well and improve. Where in chess, there's no luck. You are 100% responsible for your results. The player who played better wins every game. Uh, like, by definition, if you won, you played better than.
This sort of I mean, some people might debate that a little bit, but I certainly take your point that I mean, it's definitely not debatable. There's far, far, far less luck than poker, at least.
I mean, there are types of luck in that you can get at your opponent plays into your preparation, or unlucky that uh, something unexpected occurs, and there is randomness to that, like the cat and mouse game of opening prep and trying to surprise people is you know probabilistic and has some poker like game theory aspects to it and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, mostly the player who made the better moves wins.
Yeah.
Um, and in poker, that is extremely not the case over the short term, and even the medium term, where that continues not to be the case, is longer than ever. Like,
Or maybe if you're a casual player, it's not as long as you would like, but certainly
yeah,
if you're a pro, that can be really frustrating.
yeah. Um, and also, like, unintuitive. Like, people kind of intuitively that playing better ought to be winning more directly and quickly than it necessarily does. And I think, when chess players take up poker, the psychology that they develop in the chess realm, I think, often really holds them back, because they just get so frustrated by
Yeah, I
losing.
mean, a huge thing, like a huge difference between chess and poker, I would say, is like losing to players who are much worse than you. Like in chess, I mean, you certainly lose and it's really painful, but usually people who are close to your level are better than you.
Right.
Like, if you outrate someone by 800 points, you lose very, very rarely. In poker, you lose to that player all the time. Um, even players who are so bad that it's like almost like they're trying to lose deliberately,
Yeah, absolutely.
like are not even that easy to beat in poker. Like at least you're. I mean,
Yeah,
in a theoretical sense, they may be easy to outmaneuver, but you're certainly not winning anywhere close to 100% of the time.
no, not at all. Yeah, I mean, on, like, a hand by hand basis, uh, yeah, you don't even necessarily beat a player like that more than half the time.
Um, yeah. As far as where chess players struggle, there is it becoming too frustrated, too tilted, losing in these scenarios?
Yeah, chess players, yeah, get frustrated and um, you give up quickly, like it, and don't want to keep going because losing feels bad, or um, are resistant to thinking about what they could have done better in a way that is divorced from the results.
Mm.
And finding things to learn from in a hand where their opponent played badly, but maybe could have done better than what they did. Even a hand that very often, and at the other end of the spectrum, poker players can also find themselves unmotivated to improve and learn because they have this sense that, like, it doesn't matter whether they play well or not. Whoever is luckiest is going to win, or they are very comfortable just assuming they're playing about as well as they could, and the results will come. There's not really any very obvious feedback in terms of, like, did I write this hand or not. And yeah, I think that there's like a happy medium, regardless of which game is your main focus, of you know taking full accountability for playing as well as you can and thinking critically about what you can do better, and also taking losses in stride and not becoming super frustrated and despondent when you do lose. Uh,
Do you think if you had to like engineer the ideal poker player and chess player in a lab, would
yeah,
would they be pretty much the same, or would you be looking for like different qualities?
I mean, just in terms of like the types of natural aptitude, it seems like the two have certainly a lot more in common than most random pairings of disciplines.
Yeah.
Like, you go to a high level poker tournament, and a decent chunk of the field are like 1,800 plus chess players. You go to a high level poker tournament, and probably not a very significant percentage of the field are like top 1% trombonists.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, there's definitely a lot, and that they're pretty closely related, but it's not exactly the same, and it's a little hard to put my finger on exactly what the difference is. But there are, I think, zero chess GM who are also top 100 in the world poker players. There might be a couple who are in the top several hundred or thousand. I think there are.
Well,
Um,
people, I know Grischuk has played a lot of poker. I don't really have any idea how good he really is. I've never played with him or anything.
um, I actually played a decent amount with him online on PokerStars 10 plus years ago. Um, and I mean this as a compliment, and I hope it comes off that way. He he plays a lot like a really smart, talented guy who is mainly motivated to make some pretty good money in spare time doing something he finds fun. For a while, he specialized in a weird, exotic poker variant that I was also playing. That's kind of simple and unlike other poker, and was a great way to make a bunch of money for
Mm.
Edge. Um,
So maybe he was able to find like a relatively simple solution or strategy that was just working for him.
yeah, yeah. Um,
That sounds a bit, it's reminding me a little bit of another chess guy who had a lot of success in poker, Greg Shahade,
yeah.
I think was really able to have some success in like, these like tournaments, sort of relatively short stacked tournaments, and like just understanding like fold shove type decisions before, and just being really ahead of the curve on that.
If I remember right, Greg also, I think even more than tournaments, the main thing he did was short stacking cash games.
Mm, that
Played,
might be right. Yeah, this is kind of a while ago, but
yeah. This was, I mean, nearly 20 years ago. I think was when he was playing the most poker, if I remember right.
yeah, it could. Man, the time goes by fast. I don't know, but yeah, I just it
It,
sort of just reminded me about like m- maybe in a similar way to Gristrick, he was sort of able to identify an opportunity where like, hey, I've found this game, it's quite specific game where the player pool is really not getting it, and I've actually worked out a strategy that's almost mathematical. That's just going to be winning, a lot.
exactly. I remember was around that time. There were a lot of cash games running where you could buy in for anywhere from 20 to 100 times the big blind, and most players buy in for minimum and stay at the table as the stack increased. And if you were one of the very best players and playing against other people who same thing who were weaker than you, that was probably the way to make the most money. But another thing you could do is buy in for 20 big blinds and leave as soon as your stack increased four.
Well, they'll probably, in today's climate, I don't know how many games you'd be welcome back into with that strategy. I guess if you're playing in the casino, that's not really an issue.
Right. I mean, you can't really do this in the casino because, like, you have to, and there's not another game to jump into. Online, there are dozens of tables running, and you can just repeat this at one table after the next. And there's just like a built-in structural edge for the player with fewer chips. If everyone plays perfectly, and the table is 500 big blinds, one person with 20 big blinds, the 20 big blind player just wins.
That's even that's not that intuitive, but I mean that's essentially because you're better at realizing equity, right? Like you can't be blown off hands.
Yeah, I mean, being all in is an advantage within the rules of the game. Your opponents can't make you fold anymore. You put all your money in the pot and you get to see the river and win if you have the best hand.
And potentially they even blow each other off hands, right? Like someone in multi-way pots, someone makes someone else. I actually just played. I played poker for the first time in like a long time just the other night, and I saw a hand where there were one player was all in. There was a side pot with two players with nothing in it,
Yeah,
and on the river it went check, huge bet with a bluff, which is from a theoretical perspective is like one of the craziest, weirdest mistakes you can make in poker.
it is one of the worst plays you can possibly make to bet in that spot that can't beat the third player who's already all
Yeah,
in.
so actually that's like there's I don't want to get too much into the weeds of sort of poker theory, but it's like it's sort of one of the clearest signals you can get that someone doesn't understand poker on a fundamental level. So it's like most things in poker, there's deception is more important in poker than in chess, right? Like so in that sense, many things could work even if they look weird. But this is like one of the few things that's like is just like clearly terrible, almost no matter what.
Right, there's essentially no possible good out.
Yes, you do see things like that.
Yeah,
Do you have in terms of just like what's more fun for you? Do you like poker better than chess?
it's so hard to say because so much of it comes down like you. There, I guess sort of two different factors. Both have so much to do with the context of having played so much more of one than the other, which is like, on the one hand, the novelty of chess is fun, playing something I am not good at and getting in unfamiliar situations and just, doing something that is fresh, different is more. On the other hand, there's a lot of joy, like mastery, in doing something I'm really, really good at and pushing myself to make little improvements along the margins where it's hard to do when I'm playing 20 years of experience at learning new things. That um, that's a lot of fun too. And like, yeah, it's just two very different experiences. Like, I guess one good way to put it is, um, I play a bunch of Bullet on my phone to kill time, enjoy that, and I would never like pull up micro stakes poker on my phone
Yeah.
and pass the time. That I would find that totally boring. Um, so like chess, it like kind of relaxing and
Mhm.
a novelty to it. Um, on the other hand, like, if you ask me the most fun I've ever had competing at a game, like, for sure it is the highest stakes, most challenging and competitive poker that I've played, and I just can't do that in chess because, like, the most competitive chess I've ever played is like, you know, getting my ass kicked by a 13-year-old in
Yeah.
a classic.
I think that's another difference is chess. Kids are a much bigger part of chess than poker. Um, you do hear stories about like like online poker prodigies. So I know I've heard it said about some players that they started quite young, but certainly they're not getting into the casino.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
Um, what? So like one pretty big obvious difference between chess and poker is in chess you're on move, roughly half the time. So there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to calculate much of the time. In poker, ostensibly there's a lot of waiting. Maybe it's not really waiting. Maybe it's observing. Are you dialed in and like developing those reads like when it's not your turn?
Um, I'd say it varies. If I'm playing a big final table, we're in, last day, last several hours, whatever, of a tournament for huge stake. Uh, I am trying to be present, watching every last thing that happens, whether I'm in the hand or not. Um, in the early day one of a typical tournament, that's a bit less, and it's tempting to say like I'm conserving energy. I'm at a poker tournament series where I'm playing every day for 2 weeks, and it's just not to be dialed in for 12 hours a day every day. Um, and I think there is some degree of truth to that, but also like I think it would be better if I was more dialed in for a larger percentage of that, and it's a thing
Mhm.
I work on at it, and I think that is good for their results. Um,
It's sort of like in chess, there's a similar dynamic of like when your opponent's on move, are you sitting there thinking or are you strolling around, having a look, walking and relaxing? And, you can make the case like, hey, I can't calculate at maximum intensity for 4 hours. But you can also make the case, maybe it would be good for me to work a bit harder.
I think it's very only poker it can get a lot more like in poker. In the course of a 12-hour day of typical, eight-handed no limit hold'em. What I mean, it's for sure less than an hour. It might be close to 15 minutes an entire day. Like I am on the clock in a consequential and difficult spot where I am trying to make a decision more about calculation than memory. Like there's a lot of downtime in poker.
Is it hard to then ramp back up and activate and like be at your best for that moment and that decision?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that is is a real challenge. Especially like sometimes some that moment comes unexpectedly. Like most of the time, um, the hand has been building up to a point where like by pre-flop or the flop, the pot is getting big and this is going to be a consequential moment, but you haven't had a super hard decision yet. Then, like on the turn in the river, the hard decisions show up, and you've had a couple of minutes to orient yourself. Okay, it's time to get to. Um, Occasionally, like a situation up where it just goes raise 3-bet 4-bet, and you look down at a marginal hand, like and you were expecting, even after watching this action unfold, it's going to be my turn. I'm going to look at my cards, and 97% of the time I'm going to fold. And if I have aces or kings, I'm all have an easy decision. But you have ace, king, or queens, and suddenly you have a few seconds to make a pretty hard decision about whether.
And maybe you're like, damn, I wish I was watching the table dynamics a little bit better,
Yeah,
right before this.
yeah. And like very often you see people burn a couple of time back spot like that is not necessarily super difficult, but like it snuck up on them that they were going to have a harder decision than they were expecting. Um, and they like need a minute to settle in and like actually make the decision. Yeah.
Actually, that raised something you brought up that we were talking about was the time management and the time pressure side of it. And I think you were saying that that's something that you find challenging in chess, which I was a little surprised about because in poker often you do have to make quite a quick decision.
Right.
Do you find does it feel quite a lot different in chess?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of a slower thinker. I think, I do the basic arithmetic of poker and straightforward calculation in chess a little lower, if not less accurately, than other similarly strong players. Um, so like I'm a relatively speaking terrible blitz and bullet player relative to my strength at slower time controls in chat. Um, and in poker, I have a reputation as being slow. Also, um, and then like the time management aspect of things is trickier in chess as well for me, because you have a single clock for the whole game, have increment or additional time at some point, but like it's mostly continuous and you can waste all of your time on a non-critical move or on
Yeah,
overthink.
I think I think what you're saying is actually still quite underrated in chess. Like just how big of a logistical headache it is to manage a single lump sum time for the whole game and how far you can go wrong. And I actually think like so for me, I played a lot of chess as a kid, played a bunch of poker, kind of came back to chess and was able to become stronger, at least in like a rating sense. I think one of the biggest I just wrote something about this. One of the biggest things I changed
Yeah.
was I think my time management improved, not so much directly from poker, but just that playing poker for a living taught me to be more serious about winning. So it's like okay, if I really believe that like so and so is a good time management strategy, I'm going to try to implement that, even if it's kind of uncomfortable initially. Um, I don't know if that resonates at all with your experience of like playing both games as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in poker I'm a little bit better at being ruthless with myself about. Sorry, uh, I'm still here, right?
Yep. Yep.
I got a call coming in on my phone. It was just spam, but I thought I might have. What was I saying? In poker, I think I'm like pretty good about being ruthless with myself about managing my time well. Like if I in some spot on the river and I use my initial 30 seconds and one 30-second extension, um, and time is getting toward the end. Like, I don't think answer, but I either don't think it's super consequential or it- don't think another 30 seconds is going to help a lot. I suck it up and make a decision and move on with my life because I know it's important to preserve the time banks for when I need them. Um, in chess, I think, even when I'm playing a tournament and, in theory, like really focused on trying to win, it's easy for me to just get absorbed in my curiosity about the position and like really want to make the best move and having fun thinking about it. And suddenly I've like burned 30 minutes on some not very important decision. And like almost certainly I'm not making a better one than I would have made at 10 minutes, or even very likely three. Uh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, part of the difference between like playing for fun versus like really playing to win
yeah,
at some level.
yeah.
We're coming up to the top of the hour. Maybe we can do one or two questions. If anyone in the chat has a question, if you can go ahead and type a question in the chat. If anyone's got some about poker or chess, the intersection of poker and chess, give people a chance to gather their thoughts for a minute. Yeah, I just played like one of the first poker sessions I played in a really long time. For me, I mean, I have a lot of weaknesses as a poker player, but maybe the biggest one is I don't actually like poker as much as I always think I will. Like my friend Jennifer Shahadi, who has a great Substack, by the way, just had a score for like 300,000. So I think when you
Uh,
see something like that, you're like, man, it's all fun and games, and then you go and play, and you're like, yeah, it's still a grind. Okay, no questions coming in just yet. Maybe all right. Maybe we can do one to well to close it out. In so anything you know anything you want people to follow right now or
uh, I'm not doing a whole lot outside of just playing poker right now. I work with a poker training site called GTO Lab. If well, in more stuff from me, I think there's a little bit of free content there, or you can subscribe for training videos and have a course as well that you can buy. If any of that interests you. And there's a lot of good content on the site from people other than me as well. That's I've got to plug at the moment.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so GTO Lab, and yeah, my of course on here my newsletter is called Swish and Zug. Usually we mostly stick to chess, but we've got today we've got like a poker legend and a strong chess player in Ike, so this is super interesting. Um, so I guess we can call it a day. I actually finished at the hour, which I rarely do, but hey, it's okay to do that occasionally.
All right.
So hey, thank you so much. Yeah, of course could talk for another hour, but yeah, I got to call it a day today. So I'll just say thank you and yeah, really appreciate your insights.
Pleasure.
All right, I'll talk to you later. See you, everybody.